What's up everyone? Lance Hedrick here, and today I'm gonna be your tech. One of the most common espresso machine styles in the world is the E61 style group head, which is shown right here. Of course, in 1961, Fama produced this type of group head, and it has now been adopted across multiple machines. Granted, there are different iterations throughout, like this is from a Lelit Mara X. Back here I have a Lelit Bianca. They have a different take on the E61, but for the most part, it has a lot of similar features. So today, I'm gonna walk you through how the E61 group really kind of works. And then I'm also going to take a look at how heat exchangers and dual boilers feed water into the group. Now, for a lot of us, espresso is an everyday thing. And so if our machine goes down, we need to know how to fix it. And a great thing about these E61 style group heads is they're very easily maintainable. If you have a couple of wrenches, some cloth so you don't scratch up the chrome plating, you are able to get inside and make some changes to ensure that your machine has a long life. Now, for decades upon decades, this simple movement of lifting up this lever has become a routine for so many people in their morning espresso. Come in, you heat the machine up, you lift that arm and your espresso starts to flow. And that's part of our routine. You know, we get that nice creamy espresso that we drink in the morning to kind of start our day. But there's another great way to start your day on top of this. Not taking away from our espresso, but adding to that. And that brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Athletic Greens, or AG1. It's no secret that I drink way more coffee than probably the majority of you, and it's not too great for me. But in order to ensure I'm getting all the vitamins and the nutrients that I need for both gut health as well as immune system and all these different things, I take AG1. I'm gonna take 8 to 12 ounces of water, take one scoop, I'm gonna toss it in here, and then foamer. Now we all know that coffee is a diuretic and can mess with a lot of people's gut health. It can make you the regularity, if you know what I'm saying. It has great prebiotics, probiotics, as well as different plant enzymes that can really help with your gut health, which I really appreciate, especially as someone who has IBS. Also has biotin and zinc and other nutrients, which helps my hair stay flowy and gorgeous. You can try this out too by making your first purchase using the link below, which is athleticgreens.com/Lance Hedrick. And with your first purchase, you'll get a year's supply of this beauty, vitamins D3 and K2, which you just take one simple drop every day, boop, as well as 5 travel packs, which is essentially a scoop in each pack. That's about it. Thanks for sponsoring AG1. On all E61 groups, you have what's called thermosiphoning. As we see here, we have a big brass tube coming in right there, and we have one right here as well. Now what's happening is water is being input from the boiler into this top tube, and then there's some that comes out down here, recirculates into the boiler itself, and continues to do a thermosiphoning effect. Now this happens even when the pump is off and the machine is idle, as long as it's turned on. That's how we get that group head so hot without having to do anything. It gets too hot to the touch, and you need that little sticker that says, caution, don't be an idiot, don't touch me. We're gonna go straight into what happens in an E61. I wanna thank Lelit again for sending me this cutaway machine so I can, you know, more fully describe in detail what's going on here. But let's go ahead and take a look inside. So we have a cutaway right here, and a quarter section's cut out so we can see exactly what's happening inside the machine. So as I said, we have that thermosiphoning technique that's coming in. We have that the hot water inlet coming in right here. So it's right back here. You can't see it because everything is inside right now. This gap gets filled with water. All right, so we have a constant pressure, just boiling water. The hot water, the pressure from that is making this chamber fill up. So it's coming out without the pump being turned on. Very slowly, water is sputtering into here. That's very hot. Fills this chamber, and then there's a hole at the bottom of the chamber, and that's where the exit tube is to re-enter the boiler. So we have a constant thermosiphon loop that's going on inside of this chamber surrounding this. Now this brass group is obviously plated by chrome, and we have this blue color on here now to kind of, I guess, safeguard the brass since this is a showpiece. But down here you see some of the brass coming through. Everything here gets piping hot because how that heat transfer is so efficient. So you may be asking, well, the water's filled up in this chamber, why doesn't it just come on through? Well, this right here is a seal, it's a valve, so it's sealed off completely, so there's no water that's gonna come through. So as this is sitting here, it's just circulating throughout, heating everything up a lot, all right? And nothing's getting into the actual brew chamber because this is sealed off. So no water is actually getting there, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But then you look down here and these are two other valves. So you have a gasket here that whenever this position is up on the lever, it seals that off. See right there? And this one seals off here as well. Now you might be asking, why are there two valves there? Well, I'm not 100% sure, but what I have heard and read is that the pressure is so high that you need kind of a backup one as well. I've also heard people call this a pre-infusion chamber. I don't necessarily think that's right. Regardless, whenever you go up and you're in the full pump on position, both of these valves are cut off. Shut it back off, they open back up to allow the pressure release. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Now, whenever you want to fill up the group head, what we do is we start this lever into the first position. That's the first position. As you see, these valves begin to close, but they're not fully closed yet. And then this one tends to open just a little bit. You see there's a little movement there when you come up to here. And so this is where a little bit of that pre-infusion can occur that's based on the E61 style groups. You can get some water that kind of starts coming through, but it's not driven by the pump yet. The way that you drive the pump, there's a button right here. We go all the way up and it doesn't do much until it's fully compressed, which is right there. Now the pump has been actuated. So at least in the Lelit Mara X, you have this D-Lab silent pump. It's a vibratory pump, which means that we are reliant on an overpressure valve, which we'll go over here in a second. But that is the pump right there. And so this is not actuated until that button is fully compressed. We go back to the front. So as you see, once we have actuated that lever, this valve opens up here and water is now being highly pressurized because the pump has been actuated. So the water in this chamber here is now pressurized and it starts to try to release up here. There are holes surrounding this that allow small amounts of water to fill the chamber up here below what's called the mushroom cap. So water comes into this area and then there's only one exit. Since pressure is pushing up, that water cannot leave those holes again because it's being forced through the holes. So because there's nowhere for that to leave, there is only one hole that the water can escape into, and that is called the Jiggler. It is typically 0.6 millimeters. And what you see is underneath this mushroom cap, you'll see there's a little filter that is built into a lot of these machines, like so, to stop coffee particles or anything like that from getting into the Jiggler, because that Jiggler's orifice is so small that any slight thing can clog it. So if you're having issues where water's not entering your group head, it could be because the Jiggler is scaled over or there's particles that are blocking it. Now when we look inside here are those holes of which I was discussing where the water's being forced up in the chamber and into this tiny chamber. And because that pump is causing so much pressure, it then forces it through this tiny little Jiggler. Now, of course, this big gap here is from the cutaway process, but that tiny little slit is that 0.6 millimeter Jiggler that is controlling the flow rate to the group head. So the water's coming down here, and since that valve is now open, see, when it's here, it's closed off. Now that it's open, it can travel around here, and then it enters into the group itself, into the actual head. So the water comes up, it says hello to the pressure gauge or whatever you have here, or if you have a thermocouple in here, it's able to read the temperature there. But regardless, it pushes pressure here. You can have a screw here, a pressure gauge, a thermocouple, whatever it is, or both, with a Y splitter. But then we get right down here, it hits the dispersion plate, and then it hits the dispersion screen as it goes over your coffee. So this is the portafilter holder where the magic is happening. So if we weren't to relieve the pressure, then when you pulled it, it would there would be a big mess. It'd be dangerous, right? So when you're done with your shot, we're gonna turn it off. So right when we go down to this part position, the pump turns off. And then as we keep going down, it opens these valves up so the pressure can escape through these valves and out into your drip tray. So that's when you have the so the water all escapes here and it's depressurized. You can pull your portafilter out safely and you're good to go.
I lost like a gram onto the ground.
This is what you're really cleaning, all right? So when you put in a blind portafilter or a blank portafilter and you put Cafiza or whatever you use into it, what you're doing when you turn it on is the water is so high pressured that you're not really getting Cafiza back here. When it's coming through, it's building up pressure here and it starts to push back a bit. But then when you release it, you're flushing out it through down here, all right? So you don't want these to scale up. You don't want this to be malfunctioning because it needs to be able to hold the pressure. So sometimes if you have it turned on and you see a leak is happening, what could happen is you might have one of these gaskets or these seals right here could be messed up. Normally they don't sell these seals because how they're connected here, but all you would need to do is you could either unthread this to change this out, or you could unthread this to change this one out. all right? So this top valve and this bottom valve are easily replaceable. If you ever have some drips, that's likely what's causing it, is one of these has worn out or both of them have worn out. Of course, with the back pressure, pushing it back into the system, you are gonna get some up here that's gonna help clean it, but this is where descaling is so important. Whenever you have an E61 machine, because the jiggler is up here and is so prone to scale, you wanna make sure you're keeping it as clean as possible. So it's pretty easy to get up here to descale it, to do all that good stuff. Everything's just a simply threaded bolt, so as long as you got your, you know, your wrench and a cloth to not scratch, you'll be good to go to dissect and to take apart. Whenever you get like a flow control kit, all you're doing is getting a needle to control the aperture of that jiggler by going up and down, up and down. It's controlling the flow rate of the water going through that small jiggler right there. So we don't have a lot of the tubes and piping, but you'll get the gist anyway. So water enters the pump right here, comes out here, goes up through a tube here. And so this is where it enters into the solenoid and OPV system. This piece right here is actually connected to the pressure gauge for the brew boiler. So this tells you what the brew pressure is at. So on the front, when you see the pressure gauge that says brew, this is measuring what the pump, or what it says pump, I should say. Where it says pump, it's telling you what the pump is at, what the brew pressure is at the pump, not at the head. That's the little slot on the front that we showed you earlier. That's going to tell you what the back pressure is. This is telling you what the pump is pumping at, all right? So it pumps up into here, into this system. This takes a reading and goes through there. Then as it continues through, it goes through the solenoid, which is right here, and then here's the overpressure valve. Now for a vibratory pump, this is incredibly important. Whatever this is set to, whatever tension this spring is set to, is going to dictate the maximum pressure coming out. All right, so these pumps usually go up to about 15 bar. So what this does is if you have it set to 9 bar of tension, then once it exceeds that 9 bar, it allows water to come out here, which goes over in a tube that's not here right now, in order to come down and out through the little exit down here into your drip tray. So down here there's the little hole that connects to a tube, and it spits out the excess water in order to get it to the pressure that you need. So when it comes down here, comes up, it's an inlet to the boiler itself. So we have the water coming through the solenoid, the OPV right here, and the properly pressured water is going through this tube right here into the brew boiler inside the heat exchanger. So this is that big part of the thermosiphoning where hot water is coming out just based off of the boiling, the heat out of that heat exchanger. It's coming through this tube to enter the group head. So we have inlet of cold water here that goes down a tube, and the tube exits down below, and then around the tube, hot water comes back up and into this. All right, so water travels through, and after it dumps cold water into the boiler, extra water comes through. We have another solenoid here, and cool water goes through this tube to feed the steam boiler with its water. So then you see right here is where the steam is drawn out when you open the steam wand. Goes through this tube and into the steam wand itself. Inlet cool, outlet hot. And then with the brew, you have the inlet cool, you have the outlet hot. All right, so let's get inside the boiler itself. So in here, you have an inlet down below, which is from the thermosiphoning. The outlet of the group head, so it's the bottom part of the thermosyphon. So it says hot water, and it comes down this way beside the boiler. It keeps coming down and around, and it feeds back into the boiler right here. We have the inlet down here of the hot water, and then we have cool water that comes from above from this inlet valve. So we have hot water and then cool water. So this keeps in flux with fresh water and with recirculated hot water. Now, again, the thermosiphoning is very slow, so it's not like a ton of water's coming out of this at all times. A lot of it's coming from the cool inlet. Here we have the heating element for the boiler itself. So this is putting all the duty in there. If you're wanting to use the hot water, this is the simple route it takes. So it comes out from the bottom of the boiler, up and out as hot water. So it's just taking it out from right there. Of course, on top we have some things like safety features here. This is a little valve that will rise up if it's overpressured. We have the thermoprobe here that's measuring temperature inside. We have a level that's measuring the level of water inside. This is essentially how a heat exchanger works. And of course, there's PID elements inside as well as a brain that's not showing on this. We can't show a lot of the parts, but this is the rudimentary way a heat exchanger works in conjunction with an E61 style style group head. So it is important to note that although I did say that the Mara X had PID control in it, not all heat exchangers do. In fact, that's one of the big issues with heat exchangers is temperature management can be really tricky because you have that tube inside of the steam boiler and you're relying on the heat from the steam boiler and you're kind of guessing. But anyway, just a note to like make sure you know what you're buying when you get a heat exchanger. Now we have the Lelit Bianca right here. And one of the first things I want to point out is although everything here is pretty much the same, this one does have the needle valve in the group head. So you can actually see the needle extend and retract on top of that jiggler. So we'll take a close up on that right here. You have the gauge that comes with it. So of course, as I showed earlier, the pressure is gonna be red right here as that water is entering the group head and you have back pressure accumulating after it meets the resistance of the puck. And then of course, this little guy just goes, now, something I neglected to point out when we were looking at the Lelit Mara X is there is a fun kind of thing you can do to manipulate your shots. So as you noted, I said once it's all the way up, that pump is on. What you can do to have kind of a blooming style of shot where you fill the puck and you allow it to build pressure, you can actually turn off the pump without unseating the puck because the way you unseat the puck is by opening these valves up. So if you just turn the pump off by barely lowering that handle, you can have a blooming style of espresso. So essentially what you would do is you can turn it on so that the water pressurizes and fills your puck, and then you can turn the pump off while maintaining pressure inside the pump because you're not activating these valves to open up. So the pressure will stay in the pump. You'll see this pressure gauge. Let's say you raise it to 9 bar when you fill the puck, you saturate the puck, you'll see the pressure slowly decrease because there's no more pressure being pushed onto the puck itself, and then you just pop the pump back on again to raise it back to 9 bar. And you can emulate some sort of, fun types of shots doing that. You can also turn the pump off at the end of a shot if you want that pressure to dip with the water that's inside the group because it's already a pressurized system. It'll keep pushing the water however much is in this chamber, right? So it's going to continue to push it, and then you can turn it off completely to allow the pressure to depressurize. We'll show you how the dual boiler system works as opposed to the heat exchanger. So, similar to the Mara, we have the inlet tube right here. This is coming straight from the rotary pump itself, as opposed to the vibratory pump. Now, in a rotary pump, it kind of has a set pressure in it, but we still have the OPV sitting right here. This is a rated 9 to 14 bar OPV. So what this allows you to do is if you want lower pressure than the rotary pump gives you, you can lower it here. But anyway, so water comes into here. This is where pressure is being read, all right? So this pressure is being read and will show on the front pressure gauge where it's showing the pump pressure. And then it comes through, here's a solenoid, just as on the other one, comes through, here's the OPV, the overpressure valve. And on this one, we actually have, on this, we have the tube that shows where it's discarding that extra water. So it comes through this tube and through a long series of events, it comes out of that nozzle that sits behind the E61 on the front, dripping into your drip tray. So we hit the OPV, and then of course, just like on the other, we have a tube coming out, and this will enter the brew boiler, just like on the other. But in a dual boiler, there are 2 boilers. So this one goes straight into our brew boiler, which is right here. So it feeds into the top, just like the other one fed into the top. It's just feeding into an actual dedicated brew boiler. So as opposed to having that heat exchanger that's relying on the big heating element inside the steam boiler, we have our own heating element inside the brew boiler to have much more precise temperatures using PID control. As we keep moving along here, we have another solenoid, and then we have the inlet into the steam boiler. So just like on the Mara X, we have another inlet here that goes over to our steam boiler, which is the big boiler on the other side. Much larger boiler. So as you see here, big heating element inside of the steam boiler. We also take pressure of the steam boiler and it will show, this is the pressure reader, and it'll show on the pressure gauge on the front. It connects to the pressure gauge there. Just like on the Mara X, we have very similar looking things here. This is where the pressure is being read, and it shows up on that steam pressure reader on the front. But also this is where excess water will come out and is relieved in that front tray. We have the inlet cold here. We have the outlet where the steam comes out here when that steam wand is actuated. It opens a valve and it allows steam to come through. We of course have safety valve up here as well. Here, even though it's not in a heat exchanger, we have the same thermosiphoning technique that is on the other E61. So we have the cool water entering the brew boiler, which is right here. Then the water goes in. When it reaches temperature, it starts to come out through this very slowly, feeds into the group head, fills that chamber we discussed earlier, and then it falls out of this bottom tube right here, which wraps around some of the internals and re-enters the bottom of the brew boiler itself. All of these parts are super readily available, so if you're into something where you want to easily work on your own machine, these are actually pretty good options, but they do draw a lot of energy in order to heat up sufficiently, and they can be a little bit of an annoyance to keep thermally stable. But places like Lelit and ECM and Profitec, etc., are all working really hard to improve the thermal stability of these machines. But the fact that the majority of that, all of the group head is just out and about, and heat can so easily dissipate off the group, it's really difficult to, pull a lot of shots in succession without having massive fluctuations in temperatures. But I've got videos I'll link at the end of this video going over some of these other machines, these E61s, and how to manage the thermal dynamics throughout the process. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it wasn't too boring. I want to thank AG1 again for sponsoring the video to allow me to spend a lot of time deep diving, nerding out on these things. Thank you again for watching it all. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Lelit for allowing me to borrow these in order to make an educational video on them. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, please leave them below. I'd love to discuss with you there. Until then, I'm Lance, your tech.